Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.
Who is Moses? And what makes Moses, or his Hebrew name, Moshe, what makes him special? I want to share some words about that, but before I do, I want to just pose the question to you. When you think about Moshe, what do you think about that makes him special? Alan. He is a connector, right, between God and us. Moshe, right? Moshe brings the Torah. He's the first to receive the Torah. Moshe Kibel, Torah Misinai. He's the first to receive the Torah, and he passes it on to our generation. Very good. Yep, to the students and onwards to each generation. Thank you. Along those lines, there's another one. Very famous one. Yep.
He led the people out of Egypt.
He's a leader. He leads the people of Israel out of Egypt. No small task. Yeah, great.
Greatest teacher of our time.
Okay, thank you for that one. We know Moshe as Moshe Rabbeinu, Moses our rabbi, Moses our teacher. Because the Hebrew word for rabbi is, the Hebrew for teacher is rabbi. Yes.
Personal relationship with God.
Moshe had a very strong relationship with God, 100%. Thank you, Marge. I ask this question because in this week's Torah portion, we are going to learn about Moshe's foundational story, his story that defines who he is. So if you study myths or modern myths of like comic book heroes, how they were born and how they come to be influences a lot about what we learn from them and what is the story that they are trying to teach us. So if you think of Superman, he was exiled from a planet, right? Always felt a little strange, and he had to try to figure out how to manage his new identity into this new world. Think of Spider-Man, I can go onwards. But here's Moshe. And I want us to look at page 324. I'm in chapter 2, verse 11. Okay, actually, you can bottom of page 323, we're going to flip over. And this is probably a story that most of us have heard before. Vayhi bayamim hahem. Sometime after that, when Moses had grown up, he went out to his kinfolk and witnessed their labors. He saw Vayar, Ish Mitzri, Makah, Ish Ivri Me'echav. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his kinsmen. Now, this is a really rich verse. First of all, let's just do a quick review about where did Moses come from. He was born. Jewish people are now slaves in Egypt, having now gone a number of generations after the arrival of the children of Jacob into the land of Egypt. The Jewish people are growing numerous. Pharaoh is getting jealous. Pharaoh enacts horrible decrees. Things aren't going too well for the Jewish people. And then, out of the house of Levi, Moses is born. And now, Moses has goes down the Nile. He is picked up by Beth Paro, the daughter of Pharaoh, and grows up in Pharaoh's castle, Pharaoh's palace. And now here he is, a man, we could almost imagine he's like 13 years old. And he goes outside as an Egyptian. But he sees a Hebrew being beaten, and the Hebrew is identified as one of his kinsmen. So what I mentioned, there's a lot in this verse. First of all, they're seeing. One of the verbs that follows Moses for the entire Parasha of Shemot as his birth story is he's always seeing, he's always looking, he's always being aware. Secondly, kinsman is identified with himself as the Hebrews. And now we get to verse 12. Is everyone following along? This is the moment of what's going on. Now let's think about what's going to happen. He sees his kinsman being beaten. Verse 12. And this is the verse that I think is going to teach us a lot about Moshe. Vayifen cho vacho. What does he do? He turns this way and that, and vayar, again, he sees again. And what does he see? He sees no one about, and he struck down the Egyptian and hides him in the sand. So there is something very strange about this verse that a number of commentators pick up on that I think we can learn a lot from. And what I want to ask you is, what's strange about this verse? What is strange here? Again, the verse, we know his kinsman is being beaten, but in verse 12, something is very strange. I guess everyone knows, or it makes perfect sense to everyone. I guess that's maybe the silence. Yes, please. He sees no one about, but there is a Hebrew there. Yeah, very good. By the way, what are the Hebrews doing? Like, just in general in Egypt, what is their work? They're slaves, okay? So what is strange, right, about a slave doing slave work and no one is about? You would imagine, I know Nicole, your question is, why would he do that if there's someone else there? I just want to highlight that there should be other people there because slaves are working in the field. They're building pyramids. There's lots of people about. So it's very strange that Moshe is looking to see if anyone's about because everyone's about. But let's just assume, by the way, without this question, without thinking that everyone's about, what would it mean for Moses, for him to be looking to see if anyone is around? If, assuming it's a quiet area, let's say there weren't anyone there, what does that say about Moses' character? Does he want this act to be known about what he's about to do? It's very secretive. Moses, our great hero, is about to do something, but he wants no one to know about it. He wants it to be extremely private. And to me, maybe that's not the most redemptive part of Moses as a hero, that what he does in secret. So our commentators, one of them being the Netziv from the 18th century, says this is a story. To understand the power of this verse, you have to see it as there are lots of people about. This is happening by Yamim, during the day. And now we have to ask the question, if everyone is about, why is Moses looking back and forth? What's going on there? Who said that? Yes, really good. No one else is helping. Bingo, right? The story now is opening up, right? Everyone's there, and Moshe is saying, wait a second, is there not an Egyptian who's going to say, hey, this is not right. This is abusive. Moshe, according to the Netziv, is looking for someone of Egypt to stand up and say, this is wrong. And in return for seeing that no one else is standing up, Moshe says, if no one is caring about this, I will. Moshe, the person who is defined by looking, now takes the next step and says, if I see suffering and no one is doing anything about it, I will respond. That's the first lesson that we can understand from the story. If the world is silent about an abuse of the Jewish people, a Jewish person needs to stand up. That's lesson number one. Well, who else might Moshe be looking to see before he, again, we're outside, who knows, we're building a pyramid, we see a taskmaster abusing a Jewish slave, and who else is Moses looking for? Pharaoh? Did I hear someone say Pharaoh? Oh, very good. Thank you for Pharaoh. I'm going to add Pharaoh. Maybe we'll we'll merge Pharaoh with all the Egyptians. That why wasn't there someone from the Egyptian society to stand up? Okay, and no one does. Who else might be Moshe? If the first answer of the Netziv is he's looking for an Egyptian, the Ketav in the Kabbalah comes from Germany in the 19th century. It says, no. Moshe is looking for something else, for someone else. Who is he looking for? If not an Egyptian, he's looking for an Israelite. Someone, an Israelite, is observing their kinsmen being abused, and no one is doing anything? And Moshe says, no, I will stand up. This is my kinsman. I am going to stand up and stop this. And the Ketav and the Kabbalah is teaching us something very powerful. I see a couple of hands. Which is, it's very easy. When we live in a place or a time where there is a culture of fear that the Jewish people can be experiencing, it's very easy to lean into that fear and become stagnant. But Moshe instead leans into the care and love that he has for his people and overcomes that fear. That's the Ketav and the Kabbalah. Marge.
I was wondering, didn't his status allow him to just go the taskmaster to stop?
That's very interesting. That's very interesting. Are you asking, like, why didn't Moses choose a different tact in stopping this? Why the striking? By the way, I want you to know, in preparing for this morning, I was waiting for this question to be asked because it does make me a little bit uncomfortable. And I think there are two answers. One that I think there's multiple answers. I think how Moses responds is a whole separate of our Torah, but I want to give one pro-Moses, one concerning Moses. One answer that raises some concerns for Moses. The first is, Moshe could speak up, but was he living in a society where there would be a likelihood that even if he said, let's stop this, that he would be heard? This is a society that decreed under Pharaoh that they were going to, kill all the firstborn males, right? So what faith does Moses have? And he realizes, hey, I have to take matters into my own hands because society is not going to be, or the culture that I live in is not going to do anything. The second, which should also not be lost on us, is if you follow the arc of Moses' life. Again, what is Moses doing here? He is angry. And why is Moses angry? Because he sees an injustice, and he responds to this anger by striking down the source of the injustice. That is not going to bode well for the Jewish people over the course of their 40-year journey in the wilderness. And it doesn't bode well for Moses. Moses' work, frankly, is to figure out not how to stop being angry. Because what motivates the Torah is that Moses is trying to come up with a system of creating a just society. So anytime you see injustice, you should be angry. But how do you express that anger? Now, Moses doesn't make it to the land of Israel. His entire life begins in Egypt, ends in the wilderness. He never makes it to the land of Egypt. And why? Because he doesn't express his anger well, and he strikes again the rock long ago. So, Marge, I hear your question about, could Moses have taken a different tack? One is, maybe he didn't have a choice. The other is, this is the beginning of how he's learning how to manage his anger. Okay, but let's go back to what's going on in this verse. And there are two different answers. One is, Moses is looking for someone from Egypt to respond, and he doesn't. The second is, he's looking for someone of his people to respond, and he doesn't, and no one does. And therefore, Moses says, hey, I'm going to stand up for my people. I'm going to stand up for justice. There's a third piece that's going on here that also, I think, teaches us about who Moses is. Moses has to make a choice. If he does nothing, then how could he ever return to his people and say, I saw you suffering, but I did nothing? And if he does something, how could he ever return to Egypt and say, hey, I did this. Our culture, our society was wrong. I killed one of our fellow Egyptians. This is a moment where Moses has to now take off his mask of indifference and make a choice of who he is. Rabbi Kornberg, by the way, has been talking about, this is a theme coming up at the end of the book of Genesis, and we see it continue here. To be a leader, to be a source of Torah, you have to make a choice. Are you going to be with your people? Or are you going to be another? Who are you going to be? Egyptian or a Jewish person? And this is a time where Moses has to make a choice. The Talmud, by the way, tells a story highlighting how important it is to choose who you are, to become one identity. And they talk about a man who is married, and he grows old, and he marries a younger wife. And when he's in front of he has two wives. So when he's in front of his first wife, the older wife takes away his dark hair, so he only has gray hair. Says, you're an old wise man. Please, this is the relationship that for you. And when he's with his younger wife, she pulls out the gray hair and says, look at how young you are, so much life for us to experience together. And the rabbis say, what became of this man? And they say, he became bald. And they highlight how there is this idea that part of what it means to be an adult is to choose your path, is to choose your identity. And when we don't do that, it leads to confusion, stagnation, and us becoming someone who we don't even recognize. This is by Moses' foundation story. And I think there's something to be said that for us to be Moshe Rabbeinu, for us to be teachers, we have to first know who we are. And this is the story of Moses, is he finally makes the choice about who he is, and then the rest of his story and his destiny comes forward. Any questions? Yes?
I think just maybe you were going to go there. Hope I'm not overstepping. But I think in relation to what we've been experiencing since October 7th, there are people who were sort of ambivalent. Like they were born Jewish, I'm a cultural Jew, I'm a this, that. And then we see people like Michael Rappaport, who's just unbelievable out there. I mean, he's never said a thing, and we see them really embracing and defending the Jewish people, and putting their careers on the line, if you will, with everything that's happening. And people that would have never worn a Magen David or put a mezuzah up. There was the one guy with a gazillion tattoos, and he's I've never done. And all of a sudden he's his mother wants to take hers down, and he's no. And so I think we're seeing so much of that today.
100%. 100%. Thank you, Diana. In my opinion, the take of the Netziv and the Ktav and the Kabbalah, their drash is so clear, reflection of our times, and sort of shows that there's a motif of Jewish history, that it's an easy connection for us to make about what it means to stand up for ourselves during difficult times. But the point you're adding is the most important piece is before we stand up, to be able to know who we are internally. Anyone else? Shabbat Shalom, everyone.
Shabbat Shalom.